of game is
Way too much for work. You should work better.
Did you know that Go-Gurt is just yogurt? This is why I came to America.
Welcome, Patrick, to another episode of MIATC and the Chief. We are back, and it's been a couple weeks, right? How many weeks has it been? Has it been 2 or 3?
We did one like 2 weeks ago after you came back from vacation.
That's
then
right.
I went on vacation.
So we're here for 2 weeks, and then we're going to be on vacation again for another week. I've got a prior engagement that will have me hosting something a little bit different, so I will not be around. So we'll take a break that week as well. But look, it's summer. It's kind of the gap period. I mean, yeah, you got the NBA Finals, you got the NHL Finals going on, the Stanley Cup Finals going on, and the Euros are going to be at a point where they're in their finals. And so, yes, there are some things going on, but look, at the end of the day, if you've been listening for a while, you guys know we've started to lean more towards being an NFL podcast and a college football podcast than just a all-around sports podcast. Obviously, Patrick and I both love sports, but so it's we're a little bit okay with missing an episode here and there during the summer, and plus a lot of you guys are on your breaks. There are a lot of people taking vacations at this point in time anyways, so hopefully you got a little bit of a backlog of our show and some other podcasts, and you can listen to that. Patrick, quick news. Make sure you're following us on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, at MIATC Show on Twitter and Instagram, and then Matty Ice and the Chief on Facebook, and of course, at Patrick_Howie, at Matt_Sindelar on Twitter for our personal ones. The big news, Patrick, this is episode 99 since we did our relaunch. So we're I think closer to 150 episodes in that range more. But actually we're probably closer to 200 at this point if you go way back. But we are actually on, since our relaunch, since the Matty Ice and the Chief kind of rebrand, relaunch, we are going to have our 100th episode next week. Now we're not entirely sure what's going to happen because it's kind of both snuck up on us and not snuck up on us, and we're likely going to do some sort of a draft. We know that people like it when we draft. We enjoy drafting things, so we will see. I enjoy a good draft beer every once in a while, so we will see what happens next week, but make sure you join us for next week's episode. Whether you do it live on YouTube Live, where we're at currently right now. If you're listening to us on the podcast on iTunes, Apple Music, or Apple Podcasts, whatever, Spotify, that's great. That's awesome. Feel free. Keep doing it there. But we also do it live. Eventually we'll figure it out, and maybe the video won't be as jumpy. But sometimes you get to see me and Patrick make weird faces when Patrick says something that is ridiculous and off the wall. That being said, Patrick, let's get straight into our Is Back. We're back. I'm going to let you go first. What is back for you today?
What is back for me is another star athlete going down during the NBA playoffs, which could also be a shame if you want it to be. Also, what is back is Patrick Beverley being a dick.
Yeah.
Because that's never going to not be a thing. And we say that as fellow and always consistently a fan of any former Razorback, but Patrick Beverley's a dick. But going back to my previous one, Giannis goes down in their latest game. Probably not playing today. I don't think he's playing today. It didn't it looked kind of bad, but it didn't appear to be like deathly serious. Obviously, he wasn't going to die from it, but you can sometimes tell whenever a player goes down if he hurts his knee, like, oh, that's an ACL, like he's done. It didn't look to be anything like that, but you could still tell he was probably going to be out for a little while. There was a doctor who replied to a tweet. I don't know if he replied to like an ESPN tweet or something that revealed like he didn't have any structural damage, but he was like he could still be out for a couple weeks based off of what happened. So I'm not sure if we're going to see him in the finals, or they're not in the finals. I'm not sure if we're going to see him the rest of the series, which is tied 2-2. So
Tight.
yeah, very tight. I have a feeling I know what yours back is, so I'm going to let you have it, assuming that I'm right.
Let me ask you.
And if not, I'm going to come up with a third one for the both of us.
Let me ask you before I say it. What sport do you think it is?
Baseball.
Yes, you're right. Guess what, Patrick? You know what's back? $1.19 million going to Bobby Bonilla. Happy Bobby Bonilla Day!
Yay!
That's right. It's one of my favorite days of the year when we are reminded how much the Mets still continually owe Bobby Bonilla every single year. It's just always
Still owe him a lot of money.
Yeah, it's always the fun little. And look, Bobby Bonilla is not the only person who has deferred his contract that way. He's just kind of the first big famous one to do it, and it's just fun. We've still got several more years of it, Patrick, till 2020 or till 2035. He will continue to get his money. So as long as this podcast will probably go on, there will be a Bobby Bonilla Day. And even if not, July 1st will always be Bobby Bonilla Day to me.
Right. We need to, which I'm sure there already are, we need to find some Bobby Bonilla shirts. And then every year, once it's Bobby Bonilla Day, we wear our shirts.
Yeah.
And celebrate.
That's a good idea. Yeah, that would be fun. We'll have to look into that. Patrick, I'll put you on that. You are on that. So that's our is back. Let's sneak over. Let's continue, and we'll move into our first segment. And we're talking about money, so let's go ahead and stay in the money world. Patrick, today kind of began the new era of college sports. I guess that's the easiest way to put it. With all the name, image, likeness rules coming into effect now, and players being able to make money. And you know what? I'm going to let you start because I'm just going to let you start.
Okay. If you're asking me, like, if you're wanting me to start and, like, give my opinion.
Yes.
They're not, like, this is the happy medium. Because they're not being paid by the schools. They essentially have their own jobs. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
Because students can go out and do this type of thing if they can rack up this type of following. Like, a student at the school can become a TikTok or YouTube star, and then they can get a sponsorship, and then boom, they're making money while they're at school. And at the same time, like, it's not really dependent on the school itself. I mean, some of these might be because of regional deals that they have. Like, I know Derek Stingley Jr. has a deal with walk-ons. Well, that's really regional specific. Bo Nix has a deal with, like, Milo's Beverages. That's a little regional specific.
Also terrible team.
Now, a lot of these guys, like, they're, I'm going to give a shout out to a different podcast, a website, Blue Chip Scouting. I follow a lot of those guys on Twitter. They have done a pretty solid job of keeping up with NIL deals with football athletes.
Mm.
Outside of De'Aaron King, for the most part, because he has had a huge day in terms of NIL. A lot of these guys are just like opening up a Cameo account, or they've opened up an account with like Yoke Gaming, which all it is I have the app because I'd never heard of it before. What you can do is pay a certain amount of coins, and like from what I've seen, for the most part, you can pay like 200 or 250 coins, and if you don't know how much 250 coins or 200 coins, it's like $3. You can pay that many coins and then challenge these guys to a game of Madden or something. So it's not like they're, again, outside of like Derek King, they're not getting paid like $50,000, $10,000.
Yes.
They're basically employing themselves in some type of way. And like the biggest deal today that's been published was like $20,000 with Derek King.
Well, and there's that one, I want to say she's at LSU, gymnast who has like
Olivia Dunn?
Yes. Who I think they're thinking she will actually probably be the early favorite for most money earned as a collegiate athlete, because she already has so many followers on Instagram and now she can monetize and all that. Patrick, I'm gonna say this. Sometimes things can be two things, right? Sometimes a thing can be good and also bad. And that's where I think I've fallen on this. And look, Patrick, you and I are both pro get your money guys, right? Like, you and I both are very much like, we don't always necessarily agree with things. Like, should a coach stay or should a coach go? Should Nick Foles get a $30 million contract or should he not? Should you be paying Mike Glennon $12 million? No, but go Mike Glennon, get your money. So let me put it that way first. This can be both things. And I think this is both things. And I'm going to be maybe a little bit more, I hate to use the phrase hot takey, but I'm going to be a little bit more hot takey on this. I think this is a good thing if you're an athlete, this is good. I think you kind of mentioned it being a happy medium. I think in a way it kind of is. Here's the problem with it though, is that there's going to be no way to police anything on this, right? Like, you've opened the Wild Wild West. It has begun. And that's great for the players, right? That's great for a guy like Derek King. That's great for someone like Olivia Dunn. Like, that's a good thing for those people. They're going to be making a lot of money for their colleges. They're going to be making a lot of money on the side. That's a good thing. I think I think everybody, obviously we make the joke about Arian Foster calling up Fat Phil Fulmer to get food because he didn't have any in his fridge, and that being a violation, and you laugh because we've been at colleges, we've been around colleges, we've known collegiate athletes. Like,
we've known the rules.
If you're a nationally well-known running back at an SEC school and you're struggling to eat, that's your own fault. That's all I'm gonna say on that. Like, you were getting paid. You had the opportunity to be getting money. Like, look, that's the dirty secret about all this, is that everybody knows that all these people, all these athletes have been getting money on the side, have been getting different benefits here and there. And so, again, I think them being able to get money, them being able to make money is not a bad thing. But Patrick, I think we're in a dangerous time where collegiate athletics are going to be completely different in 2 years. And maybe even next year. I think obviously this year will be a bit of a trial and error phase, a bit of a not really everybody figuring things out, and even business. I mean, look, you mentioned not a lot of football players have made a lot of money so far. Not a lot of football players have signed deals. And I think that's good because optics, if you have a deal, like, it's a little fishy that Derek King had a deal ready to go first thing this morning. Like, that's a little.
You say that. Apparently, Bo Nix had made a tweet with his deal at 12:01.
Right. So that's already a little sketchy that's happening. Now, and here's where I've always had the real issue with this. Again, it doesn't bother me if collegiate athletes can make money off of their image. It doesn't bother me if they can make it off their name, yada, yada. This is probably going to mean I get an NCAA football game, which if that's all it does, I'm happy for that. But the problem with this is, and again, you and I have talked about this a little bit on past shows before, is that this is going to create such a gulf between the elite schools and the non-elite schools. And Patrick, you and I both graduated from Arkansas State, which is a very good football program right now. Well, it's a good football program right now, but very good for a mid-major, a G5 school, right? Like, it's a very good program historically over the last 10, 12 years. For a G5 school. It's well known. It gets some attention. It's not App State or even Coastal Carolina right now, but it is well known enough. But do you honestly think that players are going to go there, good players are going to go there, when they can go sit on the bench at Alabama and make 20 grand, 30 grand easily? Like, I think if you're at Arkansas State, Patrick, you're going to actually have to spend time trying to find people to give you money to some extent. Like, sure, there will be some that'll be easy. I'm sure, what's the stadium name now? Is it Liberty Bank, the Vault? I'm sure Liberty Bank will throw the starting quarterback $5 grand a semester or something. Like, I could see that being a very easy. I'm sure there will be a bunch of little things that'll give people like $900, $1,000 a semester or something like that. I can see happening at a small school. But here's where you're going to end up with issues. It is not so. Maybe football's not the one that's going to be the issue, but we're talking about baseball. We're talking about basketball. We're going to start talking about women's basketball. Women's gymnastics. Basically, any sport that's not a revenue sport. All the athletes, all the decent athletes, all the good athletes are going to be locked on rosters at big schools. And is that necessarily a bad thing? Again, no. Get your money. Like, I have no problem with that. But you're going to see where, and not that we necessarily have parity right now, but at least in things like college basketball, there's some parity. I know that was a worry with the one and done sort of thing, which didn't really pan out to be an issue, right? Like, people thought one and dones in basketball was going to mean Duke and Kentucky were going to win the national championship every year. Obviously, that hasn't panned out, and I mean, you can imagine why, right? Like, the fears that people had didn't pan out in that. But I think this one's a legit fear. When you've got a place like the University of Florida who has millions and millions of donors who own millions and billion-dollar companies, like, they're going to be able to pump 50 grand at people who, can't get that at Arkansas State. Ryan Applin would have probably made money at Arkansas State. J.D. McKissick might have made money at Arkansas State, he's one of my friends from college. But do you think Taylor Stockemer is making a lot of money at Arkansas State if he's playing at Arkansas State right now?
I think he has a chance to make money.
I think he's got a chance to make money, but not a lot. I mean, sure, part of this is you've got to go out and do it yourself. But there's not, people aren't just going to, there's not the fan base at Arkansas State or, let's say, New Mexico for, your student athletes to make a lot of money. And again, we're going to get into issues, I think, where, or at least I could see it being an issue down the road, where football players are getting paid, and maybe your women's basketball team isn't, or your baseball team isn't, or this or that. And I wonder if we're going to start seeing issues with Title IX coming into play, and then you have the issue of women's sports and non-revenue sports not making as much money as football. And so I think you're going to go in these cycles of like, okay, that the problem was they weren't making money. Now the problem is that some people are going to be making way more money than other people. And again, I think this is both things, right? It's a good thing for the athletes. I think, though, we could be looking at a Super League situation in at least the revenue sports, right? At least in college football. Is it kind of a Super League now? Yes, but there's still somewhat of a path. I could see in the next, we'll say 10 years, I could see your Ohio State, Michigan, Florida, well, basically all your SEC schools minus Vanderbilt, a couple of your big Pac-12 schools splitting off and essentially forming their own thing where that essentially just becomes a minor league football program where athletes are getting paid a lot of money, and that's fine for the athletes, but I think it's bad overall for the sport. I'm going to wait and see. I'm not going to say it's totally bad yet, but I can see where there's issues, and this has always been my thing, is that I think nobody has yet pointed out a method that seems to make, to me at least, the most amount of sense that will keep college athletics the way it is now enough that people will care about it. And not that people won't care about it with players making money, but I worry about them widening the gulf between your Arkansas States and your Floridas, your Arkansas States and your Ohio States. Like, there's already a massive gap, and the gap's only going to get bigger.
I completely understand that worry, for sure. Because, like, with your bigger schools, you can have a booster who owns a business, and even if it's like a star freshman who's not getting a lot of playing time, he can secure some type of business deal to make sure he doesn't want to transfer out. I saw this argument and I thought about it a lot because I was kind of going back and forth whether I agreed on it or not, and I still don't know. I get the point that they're making, and there are probably going to be instances where it does happen. I don't know if it's going to be like a major thing, but I don't even remember who it was on Twitter, but they made the argument that you could see players transfer more because of this, but not for the reason that you think. And he was making the point that you could see players transfer more than we are now purely because of playing time, because playing time can secure you more business deals like this. Or playing time, if you have your own product that you sell, like say if you're trying to promote your Cameo, or you've released like an apparel line of your own that you want to boost sales of, you can see revenue growth in that sense if you're on a team where you actually have a starting role, or you're on the field more than you were maybe at a bigger school, because you're putting up numbers at maybe in Arkansas State versus a school like Texas where you're in front of boosters who have businesses, but there may be players in front of you who are getting those because they're on the field and you're not. But if you can go to a different school where you can play, maybe you can get in front of different boosters, or you are actually getting eyes on your product and your name. Thus, just being on the field and racking up some stats can boost revenue of your product or just your likeness.
Yeah, that'll be interesting to keep an eye on with transfers in general. Like, how many of these, like, I'd be curious how some of these deals work. Like, obviously Derek King is done this year, like after this year anyways, but like I'll be curious with younger guys what kind of contracts they essentially sign with these businesses, if they're a year to year sort of thing, or if they're if an incoming freshman is going to sign a 4-year deal with, let's say, a car dealership in Tuscaloosa. Well, if they're the third 5-string quarterback or 5-star quarterback to sign that in that recruiting class, and they then transfer out, like, or is it going to work that I would be curious if some businesses work it into a contract that those players aren't allowed to transfer, that they signed a deal, a 4-year deal with an Alabama quarterback, and you're an Alabama quarterback, or you're in violation of the deal. Like, because I could see, and that's an interesting thing to think about too. Like, who is helping these kids? And Because
Well,
schools are
you
going to have to
say
hire.
that. You bring up a good point. Like, who is helping them? Apparently, athletes can technically sign on agents to act as NIL managers, which they're essentially agents. Because
Right.
I follow on Twitter one agent. He's not a big agent per se, but he's got a few clients. And he's like strictly an NFL agent before all this. But today he announced that like he had his first like NIL management client, and I forget what school he is, but he's still in school. But I mean, he technically didn't have any like deals or anything yet, but like he was announcing like how much social media follow that he has to try to like string up some interest in the kid. But I mean, they're not agents, but they're agents. You know what I mean?
That's gonna be interesting to keep an eye on. Just all those sorts of things, because think about how many you and I have both. Did you? I don't know if you ever took the class. I didn't take the class. It was an extra class, and I skipped it. There was an NCAA code compliance class that you could take it with our degree, and
I didn't know that was a thing, and I wish I had known because I would have done it.
I skipped it because the book itself is so ridiculously huge. And that's why there's compliance officers on campus essentially to make sure, is Ryan Applin eating a Chick-fil-A sandwich that was meant for the basketball team a violation? Yes, it is. Don't let Ryan Applin eat that sandwich.
Right.
Like, there's going to have to be – this is the issue, is that there's going to eventually be a line. And there is a line of what can happen and what can't happen. And there are going to be so many people that cross that line unknowingly, athlete-wise, that sign deals that they're not technically supposed to sign and all this stuff. And so, look, I think it's both things. I think it's good for the athletes, and I think, man, they probably could have figured out a way to do this a long time ago, but
they could have. I think you're interested to see if what they came up with was the smartest and best idea.
Yeah.
Or if it took them so long to figure something like this out where, okay, the school's not paying them, but they can go out and make money off of their name and their ability, but they didn't really think the rules through.
Right. And I think, like, it all happened so fast. I worry that I worry for the sake of the sports that there's going to be a lot of I'm trying to think of the right word for it. There's going to be because backlash.
Because, like, take for example, I know we keep talking about college football, but college football rules everything,
and that's the big money maker.
There's been quite a few deals that aren't football, but like there's a giant lack of parity in college football as it is as a whole, and so you worry that with this taking place, is there even going to be less?
Absolutely.
Like, you know how, like, for example, we're starting to see a more common theme about seeing maybe one or multiple FCS players being drafted in the first round. And we've seen a lot of quarterbacks from the FCS drafted in the first round. Are we, in the next 2-3 plus years, is that going to be a thing in the past? Because those guys are in the FCS. They're maybe either playing for a bigger school where they can get a deal, or they're hidden in the depth chart at an Alabama or an Ohio State.
Well, let me throw this at you.
Because they're a quarterback, and quarterbacks obviously are the most marketable.
Right. Let me throw this at you, Patrick. I think, what have we always talked about around draft time is that part of the reason you look at the scope of the NFL quarterbacks right now, and you start looking at at where they all went to college and what teams they were on in college. What quarterbacks usually end up being really good? They're not they're not the quarterbacks from the team that wins the national championship year in year out. They're rarely the team they're rarely quarterbacks who let's say sat in a quarterback room for 3 years and then played 1 year and came out Mitchell Trubisky sort of way. I think about it. The Russell Wilsons, the Patrick Mahomes, even the Aaron Rodgerses, like those guys all went to smaller schools, started for several years, and then became big. Carson Wentz, smaller school guy. Trey Lance, smaller school guy. And not that Trey Lance is good yet, but so here's my thing. I think again, it can be both things. I want to keep iterating that because I don't want people thinking, oh, he just doesn't want college athletes to get paid. I don't care if college athletes get paid. I think it's fine that they didn't. I think it's overblown that they were poor, destitute kids who weren't making any money. I've been around college athletics enough. They were all fine. Again, if they weren't fine, they weren't doing their due diligence themselves. You can kind of go that route on it. They could have taken out student loans just the same. They all got jobs coming out. It doesn't matter. We've been over that a bunch. But I think this is something that, again, down the road, 5-10 years, the NFL might suffer from this a little bit. And why? Because I think there's going to be there are going to be a lot of guys who I think get lost in the weeds because they want to go to a school where they can make some money now. And you're going to see less really good quarterbacks who just maybe got some offers from a school like Alabama or, to maybe come in and compete or a preferred walk-on spot at Alabama or something. And that was their option. Or they could go to Utah and start. And, a guy goes to Utah and starts for 3 or 4 years. All of a sudden his name's Alex Smith. He's, a star quarterback. Same thing with a guy like Trey Lance. I could see a guy like Trey Lance I could go have a chance to compete for a starting job at an SEC school and automatically start making money, or I could go to an FCS school that's really, really good and maybe not make any money or barely make any money and then be a starting quarterback for 3 years and then get drafted in the first round. And so is that going to happen a ton? I don't know. We may not know if that is a side effect of it. But I think that will be a side effect. I think part of the reason we've seen a lot more quarterbacks that are ready to go day one recently is because of, I think the transfer portal in a lot of ways helped things out. You could be a small school guy, start for 2 or 3 years, graduate, and go, oh, Wisconsin needs a quarterback. I've been a quarterback at NC State for a couple years. They don't want me to play quarterback anymore. I'll go to Wisconsin and then get drafted and be a star quarterback, Russell Wilson. And so I wonder if you're going to see less of good quarterbacks going to small schools where they can start and more of teams getting stacked quarterback rooms and guys essentially wasting 2 years trying to see if, making maybe $50,000 a year at Alabama, but they're 5th on the depth chart and they don't have any tape, and then they have to transfer. If they decide they want to play, they can either keep making $50,000 a year and then get a job straight out of college, or maybe transfer to a school where you don't make any money, or you got to go to a UCA or something for 2 years and not make a lot of money and hope you get drafted and can play in the NFL. So those are the things that interest me about this, and why I don't necessarily think this is a great idea for the sport or sports. But it's going to be good, at least in the short term, for the athletes. And so, again, kudos to them. I think we'll probably talk about this more as more deals come out, especially with college football and, once the college basketball ones even start heating up a little bit. We'll have to see, and essentially what are the actual rules? I think there's a lot of ambiguity for people who aren't in the rule book and don't have a rule book or whatever, don't have the guidelines, so to speak. Is Nike going to be able to come in and pay a guy $10 million?
Yeah, that's a great question because
is Zion would a Zion situation essentially be a kid going to college for a year, making $10 million to play some basketball games, and then be out, or are they not going to be allowed to sign deals like that, or is there going to be a limit to certain deals?
Yeah, is there some type of cap?
Yeah, so we'll definitely talk about this more. Again, I think the important thing for me to stress to you listeners and even to Patrick, I think Patrick kind of agrees with this. It can be both things. And so don't believe that this is the worst thing ever. Don't doom and gloom it, but also don't think that this is the greatest thing ever. Don't just think that, there's going to be negative side effects to this somewhere, and we just don't know where they're going to be yet. So definitely keep an eye out for that. But Patrick, speaking of maybe some bad things, let's move on to our shames. What do you think?
Let's do it.
Okay.
Shame, shame, I know your name.
You know what, Patrick? I'll go first. Let's stick in college sports. So I know this thing happened. I don't know how much our listeners watch college baseball. But my shame, once again, no surprise, goes out to the NCAA. Oh, if he'll play. Hang on. We'll get it.
Shame,
there it is.
Shame, I know your name.
Now, why did they get my shame, Patrick? Just an absolute travesty, the way they handled the North Carolina State thing. And you can have your opinions on vaccinated versus not vaccinated and this and that and yada yada. You can have that opinion, that's fine. What they did to those kids, first off, is absolutely atrocious. To essentially kick them out of the tournament and not even give them a chance to compete on the field, really, and make a chance and get a chance to go to the national championship. The other reason I have a massive problem with it, Patrick, did you see them immediately the next day at the next game tweet the attendance?
About how many people were there at the game?
Yes. And so that is maybe my biggest, that is more where they have the shame. It's just the optics of that, of you kicking a team out, whether they were vaccinated enough or not. And I know some of the positive tests were from vaccinated guys, yada, yada, whatever you want to believe on that, have at it. But the idea that you would kick a team out of the tournament for COVID violations, essentially, and then allow a full stadium and tweet the attendance, not knowing if those guys, those fans who came into the game were vaccinated or not, and are close enough to players that if you're worried about individual players getting it who aren't vaccinated from player to player, then you should be worried about the fans possibly giving it to the players from that close. And so just the idea of kicking a team out and then essentially gloating that you had that many people in the stadium, I have a massive problem with. And so that's why, for me, Patrick, the NCAA gets my shame.
Well, they should get a shame for basically, for every one thing they do right, which isn't very often, they do a million things wrong.
That's fair.
So let's not be surprised at the fact they did anything wrong. It's just, look, we both come at this after seeing this NC State team knock Arkansas out of the tournament. Like, we've seen this team come being one out away from championship, and then we've seen them be the number one ranked team in the country for the entire year. So, all right, this could be the year we actually do it. And we're not used to saying that.
No.
So it felt nice. So for us to feel this way, and I haven't seen one Arkansas fan. Granted, if I did, it would be because I am connected in one way or another with him on social media, and I would have terminated that immediately because they're idiots.
Yeah.
But I hadn't seen one fan from Arkansas say, "Oh, good," or anything like that. They were all pissed off because they deserved to have a shot of being in the championship game. Not only that, they had to play one game against Vanderbilt with a decimated roster, and they didn't get just obliterated in that game either. Like, it was
Right.
pretty close. And then all of a sudden, like the next day or 48 hours later, they're like, oh, well, actually, you can't play. Well, you just let them play with basically no team.
Yeah.
And then now all of a sudden they can't play. And, like, they couldn't. You could have at least let them do that again. Like, that would have been fine. I'm sure they would have gladly played with a third baseman playing in right field, or right fielder having to pitch for 4 innings.
Right.
Like, they would have done it because they could have a chance.
Right. They absolutely would have rather have gone out on their shield, to steal a term from the ancients, than to just be essentially kicked out of that. So yeah, they definitely get my shame. Who gets your shame, Patrick, or was it the same thing?
We would both have the same thing.
Shame, I know your name.
I mentioned the Beverly thing earlier, because he's a dick. But we've already known that. I've always known that, but then but I can't really hate him that much because he played at Arkansas. But after that, I'm like, okay, you're a dick.
Yeah.
Like, there's no way around it. Like, I don't. He might be one of the only former Razorbacks that I actually dislike.
Yeah, he's kind of up
And
there.
And he's not a former Razorback, but he is from around my hometown. And this is saying something, considering Scottie Pippen has been saying some outlandish things in the last week.
True.
After promoting his bourbon and now his healthy popcorn.
Have you had his bourbon? Is it any good?
I haven't had it. I want to try it.
Is it made in Arkansas?
Do what?
Is it made in Arkansas?
No, I don't think so.
Oh, he's scumbag. Scumbag. Get out of here.
He does randomly go back to Hamburg, again, randomly. Like, every so often, I'll see a picture or, someone I know would text me, guess what I just saw? I'm like, I don't know.
Scottie Pippen in the building.
It's either Jeremy Evans or it's Scottie Pippen. One of those two. Like, my mom and my aunt have met Scottie Pippen numerous times. Or, they'll have, talked. Because my mom's neighbors are, they're really close with Jeremy. So they'll go, Jeremy will go over there and, hang out when he goes to the town. So my mom was, hung out with Jeremy, several times.
I can just see your mom.
I had never met either of them.
I can just see your mom sitting around. Now, Mr. Jeremy, where you play in is it the NBA? I think my son likes that.
Gatorade League? I've heard my son talk about that Gatorade League.
Do you play for the Fort Wayne Fire Ants? I heard my son mention them once.
Yeah, that sounds like it's baseball.
We love you, Penny. We love you.
He did recently play overseas this last year, so that conversation went, how is the food over there?
Did he play for the Shanghai Sharks?
No, he played for in Greece somewhere.
Ooh, that's a good spot.
Olympos.
Olympiacos.
Yes.
Yeah, I would absolutely. Yeah, he had a good time then. He had a good time in Greece. I love Greece. It was one of the places I was supposed to go. Look, let's move on. Let's move on, Patrick, and get into our next segment. And we kind of teased it a couple weeks ago that we had, I think, maybe we had talked about the fact that we had forgot to talk about it.
Yep.
And so we're going to do it now. And that's because we're going to talk about the Chicago Bears and their quarterback situation, Patrick. While we were, I guess it must have been while we were in. Well, no, because it happened before we did our last show, and we just forgot to talk about it.
Forgot.
And that is that Andy Dalton was officially named the starter for Game 1, essentially, by Nagy, Coach Nagy. Let me ask you, Patrick, what's your thoughts on that?
See, I think it's the right move, and I don't say that as, oh, it's the right move because he gives you the best chance to win. That's not why I think it's the right move. I think it's the right move because unless you're like Trevor Lawrence, you probably shouldn't start day one. Like, there's no reason for you to have to start day one. And even then, like, you're not really starting him day one because you're trying to win a Super Bowl. You're starting him day one because you draft him with the first pick overall.
Right.
You're paying him the most money out of every draft pick. But, I mean, is there really any rush to start Fields right now? Is that the best thing for him long term? Is to go ahead and start him? Or do you don't even have to treat him like Mahomes and bench him for the entire year. Like, there's been plenty of successful scenarios where you let him sit a month, let him sit to maybe the bye week, and then you can unleash him at that point, which I don't know when their bye week is. I'm not looking at that right now, but it's not a late bye week from what I can see. So, I mean, you can let him sit for 4-6 games, and then once you think he's ready, then you can, let him out.
Well,
like,
so here's my thoughts on it, Patrick.
Yeah.
I think it's a weird move. And here's why I say that. Nagy's on the hot seat. Like,
he is.
He may have the hottest seat going into the season.
Yeah.
He's been there a while. Nothing's really happened. He's had a good defense. Nothing's really happened. Trubisky was essentially his guy. Nothing ever happened. I guess actually Trubisky was drafted before him, so it wasn't technically his guy.
Yeah.
But they rolled with him for a couple. Nagy rolled with him for a couple of years, so it was his guy enough. And then you trade up to draft a quarterback in Justin Fields. They traded up, right? I'm not misremembering that. Did they trade up?
They traded up because they were like right in the same bunch as Indy, because it was like in whatever order it originally was like, I think it was Washington, Chicago, Indianapolis.
Right.
Because that was like the next group of people before trades happened, and of course before the Wentz trade. Like, though any of those three teams could want to get a quarterback.
So
they traded up.
So you look at all. So this is why it's weird. You look at all those scenarios. A coach who's been there, who's on the hottest of hot seats.
What about a general manager who could potentially be on the hot seat as well?
General manager who's on the hot seat. A team that traded up to draft a quarterback in the first round. Like, all those things scream, I'm starting a brand new quarterback, I'm starting a brand new quarterback, I'm starting a brand new quarterback. So it's weird in that sense. Now, I agree with you. I think this is the right move. And here's the reason why. Who else did you sign this offseason? Andy Dalton. Sir Andrew Dalton. And the Red Rifle himself. And I think there is no quarterback, Patrick, that mirrors to me Alex Smith as much as Andy Dalton in the current NFL. They are such similar quarterbacks that it 100% makes sense to me that you would draft a guy like Justin Fields, but also sign a safety net in Andy Dalton and start. Look, you mentioned Mahomes. What did they do? They had Alex Smith. They started Alex Smith all year, and then they moved on from him and let Mahomes go. Or let Mahomes roll, I should say, not let him go, because that would be a different connotation in the world of sports. To me, that seems like exactly what they're setting up here. And look, I also agree with you. That doesn't necessarily mean that because you're not starting Fields, that you're doing a bad thing. You're starting a lesser quarterback. I think Andy Dalton is a fine starting quarterback. And to me, he is a step up from Mitchell Trubisky. He is a guy who can run the offense, a guy who can keep the offense solid all year. Now, he's not a world beater necessarily, and I think he got a little bit of a bad rap all those years in Cincinnati because they didn't do a lot to help him over there. But if you've got still a pretty solid defense in Chicago, you don't need a ton of pieces. You don't need a quarterback to be a world beater if you put enough around him to be successful and run a system that he can be semi-successful in. So I think Andy Dalton, from that standpoint, is a good quarterback to still go ahead and start. and to be your bridge quarterback. We talked about it. I thought he should have been signed last year by New England. I thought he should have been signed this year by New England instead of Cam Newton, especially if you're going to let old McCorkle be your quarterback. If you're going to draft McCorkle instead of one of the other quarterbacks. So I think this this idea makes a lot of sense, and I agree with you. It doesn't have to be full season like it was with Alex Smith, but I think you set yourself, if you're Nagy, you put yourself in a very good situation where you can start Dalton, wait and see on Justin Fields, because we talked about it. Justin Fields, in terms of raw talent, is one of the better quarterbacks in this draft. Sure, Trevor Lawrence is about as ready as you're going to get of a quarterback and about as good as you're going to get. Trey Lance is a raw talent that we don't know what's going to happen with either. Zach Wilson kind of is, I think, a little bit better in terms of being prepared. And then there's Justin Fields, who's, I think, right below that. Now, you've got a guy with Justin Fields who, though, I think, look at the history. And we talk about guys coming out. We talked a lot in pre-draft about Ohio State quarterbacks not amounting to much in the NFL. And we also talked about Justin Fields being likely the exception to that rule. Now, you've got a chance to let him sit for 6, 8, 10, maybe the whole season behind Andy Dalton and actually learn how to be a quarterback in the NFL, in an NFL system, before you've got to start him. And I think that's genius for him. I think if I'm Justin Fields, I'm okay with that. I'm fine with sitting behind Andy Dalton for a little bit, and you see how the season goes. If Andy Dalton gets them off to a good start, and let's say they're 5-3 after 8 games, you hold off putting Justin Fields in. If they're 8-0, you hold off putting Justin Fields in. But if you're 3-5 after 8 games, you say, okay, we gave it a shot. Let's inject Justin Fields into this offense and see if we can turn the season around before it gets too far out of hand. There are plenty of teams that have dipped into that 4-4, 3-5 sort of range and still turned a season around. And so I think, to me, 8 weeks, 8 games, however, I don't know when their bye week is either, but that 8.
Or bye week 10.
So for sure 8 games, I think you wait. But if you can if you're mediocre and you can wait till that 10th game, till that bye week to maybe throw them in there, I think that's when you do it. To me, if I'm Nagy, even though everything screams, hot seat, have to win now, I go at it from that route, and I tell my bosses, I say, look, I saw what they did with Patrick Mahomes and Alex Smith. That's what I'm trying to replicate here. I think, in Justin Fields, could have a guy long-term. I want to make sure he's the guy long-term because I want to be the guy here long-term. And so I'm not going to throw him to the wolves and maybe waste a draft pick on a high-ranking quarterback because I'm worried about my job. I think the best thing to do here is say, you know what? I'm not worried about my job. I'm going to do what's best for the team. You should bring me back next year, and maybe we can run it back with Justin Fields having learned everything and really give it a go. So, I don't know. I think it's a good idea.
I got something for you.
Okay.
So I'm looking at the schedule. I don't think that you are. You can correct me if I'm wrong.
I'm not. I got too much going on my computer.
Okay.
If I try and pull up another web page, my computer might go.
We're going to play a game here. We're kind of starting to. If you listen to the last episode, we played a little game with Matt.
Oh no.
As far as rosters, we're not going to do that.
Okay, good, because I haven't looked at any rosters lately.
I haven't really looked at a roster myself, which I guess technically I could, but
so what's the game?
Do that. What I'm going to do is this.
Okay.
Look at the schedule. So we said it's week 10, basically middle of the season. We're going to go through their first 9 games. We're going to predict their first 9 games.
Win-loss record?
And then potentially see if we see Fields starting before that bye week or after that bye week.
Okay.
Basically see if they're going to push the panic button because like we said, Nagy's on the hot seat. He may have to pull the parachute early, start Fields depending on how the season's going, or he may wait till the bye week. All right. So week 1.
Okay.
They play against the Rams. At the Rams.
Loss.
I agree. Week 2 is at home against the Bengals.
Win.
All right, 1-1. Week 3 is at Cleveland.
Loss.
Week 4 is at home against the Lions.
Win.
Okay. Week 5 at the Raiders.
Win.
Week 6 at home against Green Bay.
Win.
They beat. You're assuming that Rodgers isn't there?
Yep.
Okay.
Sticking to it.
Okay. Week 7 is on the road against the Tampa Bay Bucks.
Loss.
Next game is at home against the 49ers.
Ooh. You say at home?
Yes.
Win.
And then week 9 is a Monday night game at Pittsburgh.
Loss.
Okay, so you have them going, let's see, you had 1 win, 2, 3, 4. Did you have them winning against the Raiders? Or
Yes.
did you have them losing?
Win.
Okay, so you had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 wins.
So they're 5-4 after 9 weeks.
5-4. That's not terrible.
Yeah, and depending on where they're at in the standings, I think, especially if Aaron Rodgers is not the starting quarterback in Green Bay. Green Bay is not a good team without Aaron Rodgers. You look at Detroit. Detroit's got Jared Goff. Good luck. They're going to be bad this year. So what? Minnesota's the other team, and they haven't had to play them yet. Obviously, Minnesota's better than them. So
Yeah, they would play Minnesota twice in the final month of the season.
But you're looking at being in second in the division at worst, I think, and potentially being in first. We know the Vikings are about as up and down as any team can get, and that seems, depending on what their schedule's like, how they could be in the same sort of region. So man, I think if it's there, you don't mess with it. I think you go ahead and you put off starting him for a couple more weeks. I could see the Monday night draw being a big push to start him if you're not playing well at that point. If you're not playing well and you've got a Monday night game, if you're 3 and whatever, I guess you'd be 3-4 at that point. Or no, you'd be, I guess, 3-5 at that point if you were bad, maybe. Whatever it would be. Going into that Monday night game, I could see that being let's get our star rookie quarterback in on Monday night. And that could be a nightmare. That could not be a nightmare. But man, that schedule's not the strongest schedule to start off with.
No.
And if you're I got to think Andy Dalton can at least steer a 5-4 team on that schedule. So yeah, I think you wait. You don't rush it.
My prediction is it's going to be a little different. I think they're going to go into that being 4-5,
and then maybe you start him.
Yeah. Or.
But I also think even at 4-5, it all depends on what the division looks like. If you've got a chance,
I worry about, because after that bye week, you have a Sunday game against Baltimore. Then you have a short week playing at Detroit on Thanksgiving. So I wouldn't want to start my rookie quarterback 1 week and then his second game being on a very short week.
Except it's the Detroit Lions, so you're probably okay.
You're probably okay. I think if I wanted to unleash him after the bye week, I may want to do it actually on Thanksgiving.
Ooh, interesting. Give him the bye week and say, hey, Dalton's going to be the starter for the next game out, but go ahead and prepare. You will be starting Thanksgiving week.
Yeah, that would be my idea.
That's not a bad idea.
go into the bye week letting him know, like, hey, you need to start preparing. You're going to be the starter soon.
Well, and
We're not going to give
that's not a bad
that
idea.
Sunday.
That's not a bad idea from a preparation standpoint of just going ahead and telling your quarterback, hey, we've got a short week. Justin Fields is going to start on the short week out, so you don't even worry about learning this week's thing. And look, obviously this can all be mute.
He's got more time to prepare for his second game.
Right. Yeah. I don't hate that.
That would be how I would do.
That's not a bad idea. So look, I think we're both in agreement though that this is not. I think it shocked a lot of people that in a way that they would at least this early even go ahead and say that Andy Dalton was going to be a starter week 1. But I think it makes a lot of sense. I think they're setting up they're trying to set it up and use the Alex Smith, Patrick Mahomes model, and they're about as similar quarterback situation as you could possibly run that with. Patrick, it is time now for us to end the show, which means we need to end it on a positive note, which means it's time to treat yourself.
Treat yourself. Treat yourself. The best day of the year.
That's right. It is the best day of the year, the best time of the year. It is time to treat yourself. Patrick, I'm going to let you start it off. Who gets to treat themselves this week?
Mississippi State.
Treat yourself.
Yeah.
And if you want to play the villain card, the entire fan base of maybe college athletics, maybe college baseball, because a lot of people thought that part of the NC State deal was just giving Vandy just this free ride into the final. Not only did Mississippi State win the championship, they won their first national championship, which is awesome.
Ever in any sport.
Exactly. Like, that was their first one. Which, again, absolutely treat yourself on that. They destroyed Vanderbilt in that last game. I made sure to watch that one. And not only that, like, Kumar Rucker was pitching, which was one of the best pitchers in college baseball and has been for years now. And they lit him up. Like, from second inning on to, I think he got taken out maybe the 5th or 6th inning, and then they were still hitting homers after that. But I mean, it was insane. I haven't seen really a team hit that well against Kumar like the Bulldogs did. And they had outs. I forget the pitcher's name, but he was throwing a no-hitter through 6 innings.
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
So that's how dominant they were on both sides of the ball. So kudos to the Bulldogs.
All right, Patrick, my treat yourself is going to go to international superstar Shohei Ohtani.
Treat yourself.
Because man is on a tear, first off. But more importantly,
On both
Patrick,
sides.
more importantly, Shohei Ohtani has committed to playing in the Home Run Derby.
Yes.
Yes! Yes!
He was on the first one too. I
Yes! It's been on my list. It's been my treat yourself. I've been waiting on it. I put it on there right after the last show. I was like, because I think right after we finished recording, it was like that next Friday, next day, it came across the phone. Shohei Ohtani is going to be has committed to be in the Home Run Derby. I was like, yes. But look, I now who he's competing against, I'm not exactly excited about. I mean, it's Pete Alonso, Trevor Story, and Trey Mancini, which Trey Mancini is a cool story.
See, that's awesome.
Yeah.
I'm not excited about Trevor Story. Like, he was hot when he first came on the scene. And
Dude's
people are
got
trying
9
to make
home
him
runs.
a superstar. I don't think he's